Item number 13, which consists of a public hearing that is being held pursuant to California Elections Code Section 21607.1D. This is a public hearing to receive input regarding communities of interest relating to redistricting for South Pasadena City Council districts. Do we have a presentation, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I will start this off. The city commenced the redistricting process this September with the assistance of a demographer, National Demographics Corporation, and a communications consultant, Tripepi & Smith. The city has conducted comprehensive outreach to engage all stakeholders, including the creation of a dedicated webpage with information on the redistricting process, schedule, and mapping tools. Regular announcements, including press releases, flyers, and educational videos, have been released through email and social media. A virtual community workshop about redistricting and communities of interest was held October 28, 2021, and the recording has been made available on the city's website. An additional public workshop is scheduled for January 31st. Also, a community survey was launched, encouraging residents to share their communities of interest. That survey is still open and accessible on the city's redistricting website. Tonight, the city is holding the first of 4 public hearings required by law. We will begin with an overview of relevant laws from our city attorney's firm, followed by a presentation from NDC on the redistricting process. Ken is actually live in the chamber this evening. He will cover the redistricting rules and goals and give an overview of mapping tools. The objective for tonight is to identify neighborhoods of interest and communities of interest and gather public input. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex Gerrymander from the city attorney's office.
Thank you, Mr. Merchant. Alex?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Gerrymander. I'm our law firm's appointed individual for all redistricting. I'm currently overseeing the redistricting process in 7 of our cities. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. Perfect. So there are 3 relevant laws in play here. The first is obviously the United States Constitution, specifically the 14th Amendment, which says, and that's where the principle of the one person, one vote comes from, and the requirement that districts have nearly equal population as much as practicable is the legal term. Next is the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965. That prohibits drawing district maps that discriminate based on race or color. And lastly is the Fair Maps Act. So it's the fair and inclusive redistricting for municipalities and political subdivisions. That's state law, as opposed to the other 2, which are federal law. And that provides the blueprint for the redistricting process. So these 3 are the most relevant laws, and they will guide us going forward. Interestingly, you may note that the California Voting Rights Act is not on this list. This city dealt with the California Voting Rights Act in its transition from at-large elections to district-based elections. And that's where it comes into play. But the California Voting Rights Act doesn't govern the redistricting process. Next slide. So I'm sure everyone has heard the term gerrymander. And I know it's a pejorative term. I just wanted to explain to clarify for people. It means to manipulate boundaries so as to favor one party or class. It's named after the American politician Eldridge Gerry, who's actually one of our founding fathers and the 5th vice president of the United States. As governor of Massachusetts in 1812, he signed a bill that created a partisan district in Boston that was compared to the shape of a mythological salamander, which is that image there on the right. So a gerrymander, I just want to note that that's not a legal term. It's a term that's often thrown around, but I want to avoid using that term in this process because it's not a legal term. It doesn't really help us. In fact, that district drawn, although it's referred to as a gerrymander, may actually be legal if it meets the requirements under the Constitution, the Federal Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Maps Act. Next slide. So this concept of packing and cracking, I also want to get into, just to give you an idea of what an unfair district or what an unlawful district might look like. Because on its face, you might look at the example on the left there, and you think, okay, well, they all live very neatly. Why don't we just draw neat lines to separate out districts? And as you can see, if you draw neat lines to separate out those districts, you might actually run into the problem of packing, which means concentrating the opposing party's voting power in a limited number of districts to reduce their voting power in other districts. In that example on the left, you'll get 5 red districts. So although you have a blue minority there, you won't have them represented in any, they won't be a majority in any district. You're going to have 5 red districts. Now, the example in the middle goes the other way. That's also an example of an unlawful method of districting. That concept is called cracking, and that's the process of diluting the voting power of the opposing party's supporters across many districts. So in this example, we've packed 2 districts full of red dots. There's only 1 blue dot in 2 of those districts, and in 2 of those districts, it's pretty much all red. And this gives blue an unfair advantage. So in this case, blue has 3 majority districts, and red, which is generally the majority in that middle box, they only have 2 majority districts. A more fair outcome would be what you see here on the right, I'm sorry. And this is just a visual representation. Obviously, in the city of South Pasadena, no way are you going to have lines this clean. I just wanted to illustrate the point of what cracking and packing look like in practice. But what we need to keep in mind are that, 1, under the federal law, we have to have equal population, and we can't discriminate based on any protected classification. And number 2, and the demographer will get into this in more detail, state law requires the following 4 considerations under the Fair Maps Act: that the districts be geographically contiguous, that we maintain the geographic integrity of the local neighborhoods, that the lines be easily identifiable and understandable, and that we maintain geographic compactness. And with that, I'll turn it over to the demographer.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome Mr. Ken Chalkins, who is with National Demographics Corporation, specially hired by the city to assist us with this rather technical topic. Please
The
proceed,
mayor,
Mr.
and members of the
Chalkins.
council and staff and public, thank you. It's nice to be back in this room. I was here a good 25 plus years ago as a representative from Southern California Edison many, many moons ago. A couple of things I want to just comment on before I get to the thing. I don't know many jurisdictions in the United States who are going to talk about flying ostriches. It's unique. But I must tell you, in the quiet of this room, it's quite somber and very serious. We need to just appreciate this process is going on across the United States. From mosquito abatement districts to counties, to, as you're reading in the paper, to big cities and small cities and statewide. And it is contentious and it's messy. It doesn't have to be, but it is. This is the foundational element of a democracy. You are drawing the lines that will then allow people to represent the people. And it seems very calm here. Last night I was in Kings County. In the morning we were talking with Sonoma County. There is a lot going on. That is, it's a significant and complicated process. It seems simple on its face, but I don't want to underestimate the weight and the importance of what this is, which is why it's really important to hear the voices of the community through you and around the process, so we and you get it right, because it lasts, as we know, for 10 years. Let me start with that. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to run through a little bit of the timeline, some rules, the mapping stuff, and just give you a sense of the process. As you can see, and it was mentioned, we're at the beginning of this process. We had a workshop. There were a couple of people there. I'm going to have to look up here. I didn't bring it in front of me. We will have there'll be a public hearing which is today. There's another public hearing on the 19th. You need to have at least 4 public hearings you will move through. There are some jurisdictions that have to get their maps done by December 17th, so they're compressed. And I'll talk about compression in just a second. You have some time to air this out. I would encourage you and the public, get your constituencies to air it out, to come to these meetings and let us hear from them. But you do have a sequence of events. I know the press here, I know the media here, I know the community is active already. Get them active. It really helps us calibrate the maps that we're going to draw for you if we hear the voices of the community, whether to leave something alone or to change it. Okay, so that's really the sequence of things. The deadline is important, a deadline to submit draft maps. We can still refine things up until the end. What you really need to think about is kind of a funnel. You'll see a lot of maps, and you'll see people putting maps online, and we'll look at them and tell you if they're legit or not. The idea is for the council eventually to refine it and get it to the point where you're looking at hopefully one map, if not 1 or 2 that are somewhat different, and then you'll have to vote to adopt a map that will last for 10 years. And what's critical, last part about the process, all of this process, all of this outreach, all of the stuff that Alex was suggesting you need to be alert to, if in fact these maps are challenged anywhere in the United States, you want to have a record that said we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did all of the things that provide the logic for the map, so that if a court is looking at it, they won't say, sorry, you missed a bunch of stuff. That's the point, is to get the input, but also to have a record that you got the input through a process.
Before you move from that slide, Mr. Chalkins, I just
Yes.
want to clarify the February 19th deadline to submit draft maps. That would be the deadline if any resident or other
Yes.
interested individual wish to submit a map, correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
We will be going back and forth from February to March. But you could be done by then. I mean, there are jurisdictions that get done very quickly. But yes, for the public to submit, and then we'll try and refine. And we may not likely show you every map that's produced by the public. If you have a map that's way out of bounds, we won't bring it to you, but we'll bring the ones that are reasonable and show you them along the way.
Thank
So-
you.
To restate a little bit about what Alex said, I want to say it maybe in a little different way. The column on the left is the Federal Voting Rights Act, equal population, one person, one vote. As populations change, you basically look at the new population and you divide it by the amount of districts. It's important to note, these are not citizens, these are not adults, these are not voting age people. These are people who live in the district. It's an absolute number of people. You divide that in Council of South Pasadena by 5, and that is the target for the size of the district. You're going to hear me talk a little later about something called equal population. You're going to try and get the districts as close as possible within a 10% boundary, 5% up and or 5% down. You want to be within that boundary. That's about as close as you can get that protects you. But the number itself is equal population and population balance. Secondly, the Federal Voting Rights Act, another way of saying what Alex said is you cannot dilute the potential for a protected class to get elected. You can't guarantee anybody's going to get elected, but you can't do something with a map that dilutes the potential and is seen by the courts as diluting the potential. And that's where you get cracking and packing. If you have enough numbers for a council, a group of people to get one council district, just by sheer numbers and concentration, and you draw a line right through that community, that's the cracking that Alex was talking about. Now you've diluted the potential. Similarly, if there were enough for 2, and you simply draw a line and you carved off enough to pack them into 1 and moved a little bit into the left and give them 1, that's called packing. Neither of those, the court would look at that and say that is diluting the potential for that protected class. Protected class, ethnic and linguistic groups, they are called out in the law. So you cannot do that, and it's for judges to be looking at. That's the stuff that we get, you gotta be really careful about talking about. There are no racial gerrymandering. Lots of these processes get moving along and we start talking about a Hispanic district or an African American district. That language is really problematic. You need to be looking at communities of interest and where they fit. Because the courts will look at it and say, did you crack or pack or dilute the potential of a group? Now, in the middle is from the state law, the Fair Maps Act, and this is really what's going to drive the process most directly, I would say. These are listed in order of priority. The maps you draw need to be, number one, geographically contiguous. Now, Alex used a phrase which is absolutely correct. To the extent practicable. You're going to do everything you can to actually make sure that the districts that you have are together. In South Pass, it's not as much of an issue. There are cities where there is county land that drives right through cities, and you can't connect them. They have to literally hop over. They have to do things, right? So it looks a little screwy, except for the county, right? In South Pass, you don't have, but that's the primary objective to the extent practicable. The next one, the communities of interest, is really a term of art. And the beauty about this is, if I asked people here or anywhere, what is a community? Most people's minds go geography. What's your community? And they say, well, Main Street and South Street, et cetera. This language, the way it's written in the state law, allows you to define the community of interest. Is it geography? Is it socioeconomic status? Is it renters versus owners? Is it lot size? It's all sorts of ways that you can define your communities of interest. And that's what we really want to hear from you and from the community, the actual people that come to these workshops. What is it that needs to be kept together that allows representation to be more pure, pristine, direct? Third, easily identified boundaries. That is literally can be man-made. So you have, I live close to here, the 110 freeway. You have a park, and a lot of places have natural boundaries. It can be natural or person-made, right? Those are legit. If somebody says, oh no, we never go north of the 110 freeway. Okay, well, north and south. In Pasadena, the 210 is a significant split. And in some places you'll find, no, people go underneath or over the freeway all the time. It is up to you to define it so that the record shows we did this on purpose. Beyond the park, in front of the park, south of this, etc. You define the boundaries, the communities of interest, and try and keep it contiguous. The last part is compact. This one, the reason that Alex said that map that is used often to show gerrymandering might very well be legal, could be. If it is circuitous, but you can show the logic of how you got there based on the other factors, you can look at a map like that. By and large, it's an eye test. I'll know it when I see it. If something is hopping over one community to get to another or around, and you don't have any reason, shape, or form, in the 1800s when they did it, it was clear partisan. It was party. That's what they were looking at, right? But now, if you have a logic of what the map should look like, you have to then define and explain compactness. In a city the size of South Pasadena, it's usually not as much of an issue, but it could be. The key is to make sure that the conversation is thorough and you have a logic for how the districts are drawn. The last part are other traditional principles. They're used. They don't have to be used. You want to make sure that people who voted for you all by district, if people are used to a district, and you try and minimize adjustments to the extent that you can, unless, for example, there has been a significant move in population or there's a significant movement in the jurisdiction. You want to, again, respect voters' choices, meaning if you elected somebody for a 4-year term, and by drawing the line, they would be moved into a 2-year seat. You're basically disenfranchising the people that elected you for the 4-year seat. You try and minimize that as best you can. Again, after you go through the federal and the state laws. Future population growth, if your planning department looks at a development that shows they're going to be 500 new units somewhere, and you know they're coming in the next 4 years, you can't predict that it's going to happen, but it looks like it. You can underpopulate a district knowing that it could potentially grow into that target number that you're after. And again, you're trying to, the final one is preserving the core to the extent that it makes sense. If you think the stability makes sense and the districts make sense and they hit all the other stuff, then you can certainly use that because you're arguing you don't want to confuse or disenfranchise or upset voters in their representation. All of these things are done. None of them are perfect. None of them are, absolute. They all interact with each other. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments, and then we'll move forward.
It doesn't appear so.
Great.
Proceed.
Thank you. This is your current set. I would notice some cities, jurisdictions, counties, et cetera, you'll see horizontal or vertical. You seem to have both in the city of South Pasadena. And it's okay. I'm sure each of you that represent these districts could explain the logic of why it stops at a certain street, or it stops at, if you can't, I see Councilman Primuth, if you can't, but that's an area for you to bring forward with your community and say, why is this stop here? This doesn't make any sense at all, right? You can see you've got 4 districts that go above the freeway. Freeway is obviously not an issue for you in this map, right? So the idea is to look at the map and think it through. The one phrase I want to make sure that we get settled here, try not to focus on the map, focus on the territory. People get really focused on the lines. The lines will come. Just talk to us and tell us, where is this community? Where's the territory? Is Bristol Farms an anchor? I don't know. Is the hill over here, the water tower, is that an anchor? Tell us about the neighborhoods and how it mixes. That will keep us in with the language of the preceding slide. When you start to get down to, Mayor, your comment as you get later and later in the mapping, of course, we're going to start to look at a more finer tune to get population balance. We'll look at the lines. But right now, you really want to look at the communities of interest and what makes sense for this community. After all of the years, has there been a shift in what makes sense for South Pasadena? If so, let's hear about it. While it's not all about the numbers, each of the maps will come with, and by the way, there is way more data than this. You have no idea how many line items there are that the census is split into, right? The most significant one here is highlighted from my perspective, the significant. This is the one that tells you, are you population balanced right now? So if you look all the way to the right, you'll see 11.81. That is garnered from taking the -6 in District 2. That means District 2 is -6% from the target number, and District 3 is 5 plus over. That total is more than 10. That's the one you want to kind of adjust. Now, does that mean all we have to do is adjust District 2 and 3? Perhaps. Perhaps. Don't get tricked into thinking all I got to do is to get to 8 to 9, adjust this and that. There's something we use in mapping called the ripple effect. You can adjust District 2. Oh my gosh, where do we go? You got to move to District 3. Oh God, well that changes District 4. And all of a sudden you're literally made a loop. And so it's not as easy as it looks. Sometimes you can make a quick adjustment and you're done with it and you think that the community, it works. I would submit to you, that's the first thing that's important. The second one is you will see total population, and you see that top line item by ethnic communities, but you'll see citizen voting age. Sometimes there is a significant discrepancy in those numbers. And what you're doing when you talk about the dilution or potential dilution of vote is you really got to look at citizen voting age. If you've got a district with a lot of young people in it, they're counted as the total population. If they can't vote, then that'll dilute the potential for that area to potentially select somebody from a protected class. Make sense? So there's a lot of numbers around here, and we can chop it all kinds of ways. There was an issue that came up, I think, about precincts. The issues the items that are in the census are the items that are in the census. You'll see later, the items that are in the maps are the items that come with the maps. We can't overlay things. And in fact, precinct maps are drawn after we draw the district maps. And so you have to do this first, and then we do the election community does the precinct maps afterward. Okay? So we're down to it. The key questions are, and we may have gotten this out of order here because I really want to show you the mapping tools. But we really, in our workshops and here today, our public hearings, I'm hoping to hear from you and the public or anybody else. How would you define your community? Oh, the other thing I would say is you don't have to draw a map of the whole city. If you just say, look, I'm mostly interested in Councilman Primus district, and here's where I think it should change. Or just with a crayon on it, I just think this is a community. Same thing with a community of interest. I don't need the whole city. If you just want to tell me that the southern part of South Pasadena should be, east or west of the high school, that's all. We take that data and we put it into the maps. And if we hear enough of it, everybody keeps saying this whole south of this and west of that or east of that, that's what we drive into the maps. So what is your neighborhood? What are the boundaries? It's a small enough city, you could walk it. I'm sure many of you have, right? But it doesn't mean it's any less complicated or sophisticated. There's all kinds of little curves and twists here. So that's what we want to hear in these kinds of meetings, in the public hearing. Later on, again, as the mayor suggested, you're going to start to really refine mapping, which is a whole different story. Okay? I think this actually restates it. I may take this out, but I do want to point out the one thing, this shared socio or economic interest, that's significant. It comes up. There's a real challenging questions. Do you want to have a district of all wealthy people or all lower income people? Or do you not? Some people would say, no, we need that so we can get that voice represented. Some say, no, we want to cut that so that it's mixed, so we really live. The logic is up to you. We just need to hear it and hear it clearly. So if you say to us, we want a socioeconomic, and again, and mostly that, and I know here in South Pasadena, mostly it comes with renting and owning. The south part, I know there's a lot more apartments. That you could very easily say, we want to draw that into a district to be represented. But you could also say we want to cut it. We want to make sure that it's included with others. It's up to you to decide. And that's what I mean. Would it be beneficial to be included within one district? Some people would say, I would rather our community be in two districts. Why? They could call Councilman Cacchiotti and they could call Councilman Donovan. They get two people to come to this council meeting and say, represent us. Or if you put them in one, no, I'm a large part of Councilman Cacciotti's district. He better listen to us. There's two different logic sets you can use. Just be clear about which ones you're using for your community or which one makes sense for South Pasadena. The last part is important. It's funny, communities of interest in gerrymandering has been connected with political parties. You are absolutely not to use that in the least, right? It's just not allowed. Okay, so let me just talk about the tools that are coming, and they will be fully loaded after Thanksgiving. You can imagine, by the way, this is not a COVID excuse, but with COVID, the census came out way late. We were supposed to get it on the 20th of September. It came in late, a week later. So we're only like a month plus 6 weeks into it. And all that data gets loaded, and then it has to go to softwares and gets checked for accuracy and all kinds of stuff. And so all of the jurisdictions that have their deadline in December have been just crunched. I'm not saying that you get, your second cousin because you're later. I'm just saying you are in a different part of the line because we have some more time to air this out. Your community, I know this community, they will speak out when they have the tools, and you're going to see a lot from them, right? But we are going to offer tools online, and you'll see different ones. Okay, so literally there will be something called a paper kit. You can print it, you can draw on it with a crayon and or a pen or a pencil. Those numbers that are in each parcel represent population. If you want to do the math yourself, you can. There's also, I think the next slide is, there's also a connection to an Excel spreadsheet, so you can work these together. And if you're really, focused on it, you can do it this way by hand with an Excel spreadsheet and try and get the population balance as best you can. If you want to say basta to the population balance and just here's the communities and here, then you can do that to us and say, this is important to me. You all figure out the numbers. Whatever you want, push it in. There will be some people that will want to use, that will want to use a little bit more sophisticated. Dave's is a rather easy platform. I believe the South Pass data is loaded on the Dave's platform. It's not colored by numbers, but it's close. And it's relatively intuitive and easier to use. So those members in the community and or city staff or whoever want to play around with it, you got to go in, you click your link, it'll take you, it's already loaded, I think, with your data. And then you basically try and draw your map as you would, or your communities as you would. And then the last one, this is for people who are quite sophisticated in it. It's called Maptitude. They've had some issues with loading the data on time. And so I don't believe it's there for South Pasadena right now, but it is a very powerful tool. It's something that we would use as demographers. But, you know, there's this little university up the hill in Caltech. You might have some people that are very, very easily would use something like this. Or just, frankly, citizens. It's not hard to use. It's just more complicated. That's all. But it is. So you'll have those options to give to us. And then we'll start to post them in your space so that people can see them. And then as we move along, you're going to ask us for draft maps, and then we will bring them to start to consider variability in maps. And again, that's where we start to refine it, or frankly not. Kings County went from, we went from 3 to 6 within 2 weeks. But then last night they went back down to 2. So the idea is to kind of funnel and get it close. This is the website. This is for you and your citizens, where you'd go to get all the information, timelines. I think you can ask questions there as well, and that's where the mapping tools and information is. The clerk has been great, Lucy, are you still there listening to us? No, she really has been great helping us move along with your time frame, and we're excited about doing this. You're at the beginning part of it, so let me stop there, see how you want to proceed forward. I've got my pen and paper at the ready.
Great. Are there any questions for Ken? I have one, Ken, and that is your last series of slides showed a number of different mapping tools. Do we have links to those mapping tools
Yes.
on our website?
Yes, not only links, but with some of them, I think all of them have instructions. So there's like either a video or instruction about how to use that tool. And we're available through the city clerk's office. To the extent that you are having issues or you have questions, we'll try and address them either in a workshop or directly. But yes.
Anybody else? I reviewed the demographic data that you displayed previously, and I think it's going to be a real challenge to identify communities of interest in our city because we are so small. It didn't appear there wasn't necessarily a racial or an ethnic group that was dominant. There's a slight modification in one of the districts where I think non-Hispanic whites are more significant. But for the most part, it appeared that we have a fairly wide dispersal of residents by race.
By
and
protected
ethnic
class.
group.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, but again, that's that space. Are there other communities of interest that you want to consider? Again, geography, natural boundaries, socioeconomic, renters versus not. But from that perspective, my understanding of South Pass, I didn't look that detailed, is it's probably true. And what you want to do is you got to be careful not to scratch your left ear with your right hand and really bend over backwards to try and make something work. That will be seen as either gerrymandering or not contiguous or not compact. But to your point, if the numbers are there for that space, then you don't worry about that space, right?
Councilmember Primmett?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit about the 2017 map drawing. I know there was probably several principles that were used to create the districts that we have now. And I'd like to know what that rationale was. I think, part of it was, everyone has a share of the commercial district, so that it's not concentrated in any one district. You know, I know that there were two sets of maps at the very end, or two different maps at the very end, just at the council meeting, and I think one of them got approved and one of them did not, and I'd like to know why. I mean, a lot of that's public record, but if we could distill why we have the maps that we have now, in terms of rationale, that would give me a starting point, because, we have every district's going to be an agglomeration of neighborhoods, right? So there's no single district that's a single neighborhood. So
It's a single what?
that's a single neighborhood. So it's an agglomeration of different things.
Correct.
And so what elements go together? Why would, do we want to put commercial and residential in every single district? Is that a good way to spread out the communities of interest so that every council member has a stake? That sort of thing.
Yep, that's a logic, and again, the city I live in is Pasadena. That's the logic they use for Colorado. Every district touches Colorado. Now, there are enough people who live along Colorado where you could argue for that to be a district, and it's been argued. And the city wants to hold fast because they want people to have a stake. Both logics are sufficient. So I don't know the history. I don't know if any of you were on the council, but I don't know the history. I will look at it, and I can certainly come back to it and present it, but I don't know I don't know about those two maps, and I don't know the history about it. Were any of you here that can share?
Michael, what do you remember?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but that's if they were there.
It's like you said, Colorado. I remember Fair Oaks. We wanted to try to use Fair Oaks as a major commercial street.
Yeah.
So you look at mine's on there, John's on there, Diane's on there. So you try to get.
Should I show the map? Do you want to go back to?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Christina, can you go? Oh, okay. Okay. Uh-oh, not working.
Getting close.
One more, it's coming. You want to do it, Christina? Oh, there's one more.
I think
There it is,
there
right?
it is.
Okay.
So if
Go
you
ahead.
look between 3 and 4, at Major Street going north-south, it's Fair Oaks, big commercial corridor. So that was one of the reasons you kind of split. My boundary stops there. Another district starts on the other side. And then another one was, I think, Monterey Road. Kind of just cuts through a lot, but that separated Diane and myself.
So for 1 and 5, or 4 and 5 rather, sorry, Monterey Road.
Monterey Road was, for the most part.
Felt like and feels like, right?
And there's also a reason, South Monterey Road is the estate section, much larger properties in some of the areas versus just north. So if you were to drive down, say, one of those streets going north-south, you see when you come to Monterey Road on certain sides like Milan,
Right.
other streets, they're much larger properties.
Yeah, and then and the south of 5 has more renters, and the north of 4 has the renters on the hill, right?
Yes.
It's kind of curious that in the middle you have the larger, but you could see Monterey Road cuts right through. Right, so that's 2 items, Councilman, that's sort of, you can see Fair Oaks. And was there anything else, Councilman Cacchiotti, that you remember?
I know that if you notice, most of the districts except mine touched the southernmost part. They were trying to get all the districts to be able to touch the south. And mine just couldn't get down there, but I don't know what the logic was, but I know that was discussed. I'm not sure why it was.
And Councilman Primuth, just to your point, the question, this is good to tease this out and then to pull on it and say, does it still work 4 or 5 years later, right?
Yeah, I think the two maps that were considered were basically different variations of how districts 2 and 3 share that center space.
Yes.
So 1, 4, and 5 kind of stayed stable?
I think on the last two maps, 1, 4, and 5 were pretty much fixed.
Is that your recollection?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also agree that the shared commercial interest was important, such that for my District 5, the portion of Fair Oaks has very little commercial other than the pavilions. And even, that's not my district. So there's very little commercial. So I picked up Huntington, the commercial on Huntington.
I forgot to mention, and I'm looking at it now, you only have the middle school and high school. Sometimes the overlay of school attendance zones is a community of interest. And you know that at the same time that this is going on, they're actually districting, going from at-large to districting. We're doing that as well. They have to think about their logic. But sometimes smaller cities or cities, they'll use that as a determinant for council districts. It doesn't mean you have to, and you got 1 and 1, right? But sometimes that's used.
I'm not sure how much we're going to be able to coordinate with the school district.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I was on the school board when we voted to go to the sub-districts in a settlement. So, they've been expecting this, and they do have significant issues. They got 3 elementary school catchment areas, and so how do you divide that up between 5 districts?
exactly. That's that's not easy math, right? But
Well,
that's right.
I'm just looking forward to the public comment because I really want to hear what people are thinking. I think, everything's on the table as far as I'm concerned, because, this was done sort of on an expedited basis in 2017 as part of a settlement, and I think this is the time when we can look at fresh data and take a deliberate approach.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, it is Lucy. I'm just going to add, Councilmember Primuth, you raised a good point, and I did want to mention that all of the when the city went from at-large to district in 2017, all of that information, including all the public comment and the maps, are on our website still. So we still have that information,
Right.
and we have kept
That's
it.
great.
So we can definitely look at that.
Very helpful. Thank you,
Thanks, Lucy.
Lucy. Well, with that, I am going to open the public hearing to receive any comment from any members of the public.
So I'm going to sit and take notes, and then if you need me more, you can call me up.
And we'll see if we have any public comment.
Madam Mayor, it does not appear we have any public comment via Zoom. No hands are raised, and I have no public comment cards in person, and there was no written public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. I'll then close the public hearing and discussion.
Mayor, I just have a question for Ken. Ken, the question is you've been doing this for a while and you understand the communities of interest, et cetera, the criteria. Looking at our map, can you go back to that map?
Oh,
Maybe pull that map up one more time?
Sorry. There you go.
Based on your background and experience, looking at this, knowing South Pass, your background, again, let's take my district, for example. You've got a lot of renters above, even actually a lot south,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's some homes, and it's kind of a contiguous district. Mayor Mahmoud is kind of similar type of larger homes, larger properties, but contiguous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the others, I know on the far left, number 1 is contiguous, and John's and Jack seem a little, they're contiguous, but a little not so straight. What are does this hold up under scrutiny, or
Well,
there's no effort to unbalance it, but
and contiguous, as opposed to, you mean compact. Contiguous means they just touch. So in other words,
touch.
compactness is one of those things where, again, I'll know it when I see it, so this doesn't look like the salamander. Again, I can't give you legal advice. I can tell you that this on its face is contiguous. I mean, all the districts touch, right? And it doesn't look like you're jumping over one to get to another. It just doesn't look that way. But it's a sort of and I'll defer to Alex to talk about it, but legally, I can't give you that advice. But on its face, it looks pretty, contiguous and compact. But again, remember, those are at different ends of the criteria. Contiguity is really important. It's more important to the extent practicable. If you had a piece of county right through and you couldn't get there, that would be right. And then secondly is the communities of interest, and you could keep going down, and then you get to compactness. So they all interplay, and so I suspect you went through this whatever years ago, and so on its face, it's just the numbers shifted, and you can see you're out of the 10% zone.
If I could add to that, Ken, when we transitioned to districts, we didn't have the Fair Maps Act. So what we had was the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is what we were referring to for the most part, and all the case law related to that.
That's right.
But now we do have the Fair Maps Act. And with respect to compactness, that term compactness means that the district shall be drawn to encourage compactness in a manner that nearby areas of a population are not bypassed
Right.
in favor of more distant populations. So I don't think we really see that here with the maps as they're drawn even back in 2017. So I don't know that we have a compactness issue. I will note, just for historical interest, when we did make that transition from at-large elections to district elections, it was because we received a letter threatening litigation under the California Voting Rights Act, because the letter alleged that the Latino population in the community was being disenfranchised as a result of the at-large elections. With NDC's help, we actually conducted a voter polarization analysis, and we confirmed two things. One, that there is no district in the city that can be a majority Latino district. So the Latino population isn't compact enough in any one area of the city to form a Latino district. And the number two thing we confirmed is that there isn't sufficient evidence to prove voter polarization between the Latino population and the general white population. Just a point of historical interest. So when we draw districts, if there was that determination, then under the Federal Voting Rights Act, we would have to try to draw a Latino district. But we did that analysis in the past. We couldn't find any evidence of it. And so as a result, when we drew these districts, we weren't trying to draw necessarily a Latino majority district.
And I just got a note from folks from Trepepi Smith, who just sent it to me. The only one that's active right now is Dave's. That's fully loaded, and that's a good thing. You should start with Dave's, unless you like to draw it by hand. That's the one that's active. After Thanksgiving, we're going to try and get it as soon as possible. It's a matter of backlog, but we'll get that soon.
Ken, I just received a text message from a resident who tells me that she couldn't get into Zoom for the meeting, and perhaps that is why we're not getting any comments. Could you please check with Trepepi Smith and see whether or not they have Zoom access?
Well, she's texting me, so from the same thing. But Sydney and or Lucy, if you know that. Pardon? Yeah,
Yes.
Sydney's on the meeting, and I don't. How many other people do we have on the meeting, Christina?
We have one attendee from the public, but it is open, and the Zoom link does not require a password.
Thanks, Lucy. The thing I would say is that resident, you can let them know to come to the workshop. We're going to go through this over and over again. I apologize. I don't know what's going on with the Zoom, but make sure they have the dates, and it's coming up, so we'll be able to help them.
Okay, thank you. And if other members of the public are having difficulty accessing this meeting via Zoom, could you please text me at 626-808-2715 to let me know, and also indicate whether or not you would have liked to have submitted comment? That would be very important for us to know. Thank you very much.
Mayor, can I note one last time that comments are also, they can be submitted through email, through the redistricting at southpasadenaca.gov email, also available on our website.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. That is also helpful. Ken, I have some more questions for you. This is
That's what we're done with me, yes.
this is a quite complex process, and unfortunately, it's made all the more complex. I saw, among other things, that we should consider future population growth. And, for example, we have 3 rather significant housing projects that are entitled, that we believe are going to move forward. So I assume that we should factor in anticipated populations from those entitled projects. But more importantly, as you may know, all of the cities in the Southland have been assigned very significant RHNA, Regional Housing Need Assessment,
Yep.
numbers, and our household numbers are such that we have to plan for an increase of about 18% of housing units over our existing housing units, over our existing number of housing units. So we're currently in the process of developing a housing element, and I believe that that housing element will be pretty far along. Okay, great, thank you. That will be pretty far along in terms of identifying where that additional housing will be built to a substantial extent by, say, mid-February, by the time that the
Yep.
public, the deadline for the public to submit comments. So I would assume that we should also then take into consideration the areas where we anticipate the greatest concentration of those additional housing units that we're planning
You-
for.
I think I get the question. First of all, those are units. We don't know how many people will live in those units, right? They're
Correct.
not units, so
They're
that's
just
one
units.
thing. Are they
Right.
multifamily, whatever, and that'll change the math, right? But secondly, where they're concentrated in a certain area, absolutely. It doesn't mean you have to. You could not take it into account, and then in 10 years, guess what? The numbers will be high in that district. But the law allows you to underpopulate an area, again, so that the logic of it going forward, if someone says, well, wait a second, this is way low. Well, we know in 2 years it's not going to be, and that was our logic. That was the community of interest plus, 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 and we knew it was going to grow. And state law, by the way, is a really strong logic. So all the jurisdictions are having to deal with that as well. So you can't, without a doubt.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion?
Let me just kind of throw out, I think, three things. One is, I think it's great to identify the areas that are going to have future housing growth, and that can be part of our planning for districts. The other question I would propose is the clearly identified neighborhoods. There are some that it's not so clear that are cohesive, but there are several that are pretty cohesive. One being Raymond Hill, another being the Altos, and I would say, possibly south of Huntington on the east side. The question I would say is it effective to put those entire neighborhoods in one district, or is there a purpose to split it up so that there's two council members who have an interest in that neighborhood? Right now, it seems to be fine. I haven't heard any issues with that. So I would propose that, maybe we build with what we have existing for those neighborhoods, keep them in their districts. Second, we look at whether sharing commercial property areas is an important principle for all of the districts, because that was one of the organizing principles last time. Do we want to carry that forward this time? And then the third is the housing. Where's the new growth going to occur? And do we want to spread that out between districts, or is that going to be in a concentrated area?
Good, thank you. That's the kind of feedback that we're looking for. Those are questions,
Yes.
but the answers to those questions will drive the map. And that has nothing to do with lines, that has to do with communities, and that's exactly what we need.
Okay. Ken, I think
Can I sit?
I think we've accomplished as much as we can accomplish. We've received a report. We have conducted a public hearing. I have not received any other text messages of individuals that wanted to speak in public comment. And as Ms. Demerjen noted, they have the opportunity to submit written comment via our redistricting webpage on our city's
Madam Mayor?
website. Yes.
So both I and a member of staff have tested the link on the agenda and gotten into the system, and the city clerk has acknowledged that we were able to raise our hands to show that we wanted to speak after you made that announcement. So the link is working, the system is working. I don't know what's going on outside, but using our own external search situation, we were able to participate.
Excellent. Maybe the resident had some internet issues. Thank you very much for that clarification. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chalkins. We'll look forward to seeing you in the future, the next hearing.